Hello, dear listeners, and welcome back to Silent Husband Club. We apologize for the long silence on our channel, but from now on, we'll strive to bring you new stories every single day. They say betrayal begins quietly, hidden behind smiles, late-night excuses, and locked phones. But when a husband's gut whispers the truth, the silence in his home becomes louder than any scream. What would you do if the person you trusted most started to feel like a stranger? If you enjoy stories of love, betrayal, and resilience, please subscribe, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support keeps this channel alive. As twilight deepened and shadows crept across the quiet suburban street, I guided my old truck slowly into the driveway, the tires crunching against the gravel. For a moment, I didn't step out. I just sat there, hands resting on the steering wheel, staring at the house that had once been my sanctuary. The porch light glowed softly, a neighbor's grill smoke drifted lazily into the air, and the faint laughter of children floated in the distance. It looked peaceful, too peaceful, almost staged, as if the world wanted me to believe nothing was wrong. But deep inside, I knew better. My instincts, sharpened long ago, whispered that the storm had already begun. I stepped out and looked at the house. 2 stories tall, pale shutters, a lawn neatly trimmed as always. On the outside, it hadn't changed since Evelyn and I first walked through its empty halls 14 years ago. I could still see her in my mind barefoot, laughing, spinning through the rooms, pointing where the bookshelves and mirrors would go. We hadn't even unpacked the boxes, yet somehow, it already felt like home. Back then, I believed that happiness like ours was permanent. I believed I had finally earned peace after years of struggle, homemade dinners, quiet evenings, her voice humming in the kitchen. I thought that would last. But standing there now, looking at the upstairs window with its light still on, all I felt was unease. I'm Daniel Cole. Early 40s, broad shoulders, still carrying the posture of my years in the service. Time has carved lines into my face, dusted gray into my hair, but I wear them like old medals. People say I look solid, grounded. But the truth? I'd never felt more untethered. Evelyn's laughter by the lake when I proposed still echoes in my memory, the way she cried and said yes without hesitation, the way I thought we had the world ahead of us. Yet lately, that certainty had slipped through my fingers like sand. When I stepped inside, the hallway was dark. That detail struck me. Evelyn always left the light on when I came home. Always. But tonight? Nothing. Just shadows, silence, and the faint smell of lavender from a face that had long since dried out. On the wall hung her wedding photo, her smile wide and radiant as I wrapped an arm around her waist. I kicked off my shoes and stood there staring at it, but instead of comfort, I felt the weight of emptiness pressing down. She had been distant for weeks now, maybe months. Conversations grew shorter, her stories about work or friends evaporated into clipped excuses. I'm fine, just tired. That was her refrain. And I let it slide, convincing myself she only needed space. But inside, I knew better. Something had shifted. Something she didn't want me to see. I wandered into the kitchen and saw a note pinned to the fridge in her tidy handwriting, going to be late. Don't wait for dinner. That was it. No heart, no love you, not even a small flourish. Cold, distant, like a message left for a roommate, not a husband. I tried to brush it off. Poured dog food into Barney's bowl, but he didn't come running. That's when I remembered Evelyn had taken him to the vet earlier that morning, then promised him a walk in the park. Yet now, it was close to 9 at night, and neither of them were home. I sat in the living room, magazine open in my lap but unread, the ticking clock louder with every second. The house was quiet, but it wasn't the kind of quiet I once cherished. This was different. This was absence. My phone felt heavy in my hand. I dialed her number straight to voicemail. I typed out a message, "You okay? Where are you?" Delivered. No reply. That's when I felt it, not jealousy, but something colder, sharper. In 14 years, I had never doubted her. She was beautiful, magnetic, people noticed her everywhere she went. But she had chosen me, a quiet engineer more at home with tools than parties, and I trusted her. I never imagined a day would come when I'd stare at my phone, wondering if the woman I married was still mine at all. I glanced at the photo album on the shelf, opened it, and flipped through pages that once meant everything: our wedding, our first anniversary, vacations, the day we brought Barney home as a puppy. Smiles that felt eternal back then now looked like ghosts. Last night, she had slipped into bed without a word, turning her back to me, shutting me out. I lay awake, wondering if I was losing her already, even as she slept a few feet away. And tonight? Tonight the silence wasn't just silence. It was denial. A wall. A truth waiting in the shadows. I didn't know it then, but the life I thought was steady and unshakable was already cracking, and soon, it would shatter completely. That night dragged on endlessly, each creak of the floorboards, each whisper of wind against the windows feeding the unease inside me. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, that Evelyn was simply overworked, caught up in some project she hadn't mentioned. But then the thought came, why hadn't she mentioned it? She used to share every detail, every frustration, every little triumph. Now her words were rationed, guarded, as if every sentence had to pass through some unseen filter before it reached me. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the shower upstairs, listening to the sound of her footsteps, to the silence when she finally slid under the covers and turned away from me. I wanted to reach out, to say something, to bridge the distance. Instead, I stared into the dark, and she drifted further away. The next morning, she was already gone by the time I woke. A faint trace of perfume lingered in the air, stronger than usual, mixed with a note of something else, something distinctly male. I couldn't ignore it anymore. Downstairs, I found her moving quickly around the kitchen, dressed in a sharp pantsuit that seemed far too formal for a casual Friday. Her eyes widened when she saw me, as if surprised I was up earlier than usual. "Morning," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "Hi," she replied, forcing a smile, offering me eggs. We ate in silence, the scrape of cutlery and the ticking of the clock louder than any words. When I asked about her late night, she cut me off with excuses about deadlines and pressure at work. The words came out rehearsed, clipped, and empty. She used to vent endlessly about her boss or colleagues, now she gave me nothing. I studied her carefully as she rushed through breakfast, clutching her phone as though it were oxygen. She left in a hurry, muttering "love you" without even glancing my way, skipping the kiss that had once been automatic. I sat there at the table staring at my untouched food. I couldn't do it anymore, pretend her distance was nothing, pretend her stories added up. I opened my laptop, pulled up our shared phone plan, and began scrolling through the logs. Most of the numbers were familiar, but one stood out. It wasn't local. It appeared late at night, again and again, almost every day. Calls. Texts. Always the same number. My stomach clenched as I remembered the name Victor Hale. A lawyer Evelyn had once mentioned casually, from a conference out of town. At the time, it had been harmless background noise, but now? Now it felt like a knife waiting for my back. The thought of divorce slammed into me with a weight I wasn't prepared for. I hadn't let myself think the word, hadn't let it form in my mind until now. But there it was, heavy and inevitable. If Evelyn was lying to me, if she was giving herself to someone else, then what was left for us? Still, suspicion wasn't enough. I needed proof. Proof I couldn't ignore. Proof she couldn't deny. That afternoon, I drove to the vet clinic. I smiled politely at the receptionist, asked about Barney's visit. She flipped through her notes and told me plainly, he'd been there yesterday evening, checked in around 6, done by 6:40. That was it. By 6:40, Evelyn was free. And yet she didn't come home until after 9. Almost 3 hours unaccounted for. When I stepped outside, sunlight hit me hard, but all I felt was cold. I sat in my truck gripping the wheel, my heart pounding against my ribs. She had lied. I knew it now, not in theory, not in suspicion, but in fact. The story about the vet, about running into Sarah, it had all been smoke and mirrors. She had been somewhere else. With someone else. My gut had been right all along. I drove home in silence, my thoughts spinning, a storm I could no longer contain. If she could hide the truth from me, then I had every right to find it. But I wouldn't confront her, not yet. Not without proof. That night, after she went to bed, I dug through old boxes in the attic and found a dusty Android phone from years ago, a relic I once used for experiments. It still powered on. I linked it to my Google account, set up location tracking. My hand shook as I held the device, not from fear, but from the clarity of knowing what I had to do. The next morning, I slipped quietly outside, the spare keys to her car cold in my hand. The street was empty, the neighborhood asleep. I opened the door of her sedan, crouched low, and tucked the phone beneath the passenger seat where it would stay hidden but still send its signal. I locked the door and walked back to the house, heart pounding. It was done. Now all I had to do was wait. That weekend, Evelyn kissed me goodbye on the cheek as if nothing were wrong, telling me she'd be gone all day for meetings. I smiled, nodded, played along. But the moment her car turned the corner, I opened the app. The little dot appeared on the map, moving east, not toward her office, not toward the city, but away. Hours later, it stopped in a remote town, at a spa resort, tucked quietly against the trees. Not work. Not meetings. A weekend getaway. My hands went cold as ice, and I knew the truth had just stepped out of the shadows. I drove out that morning with my hands gripping the wheel so tightly they ached, the old truck humming beneath me as miles slipped past. The resort sat tucked away from the highway, a place meant for escape, for secret weekends, for lovers who wanted to vanish from the world. I parked far enough to keep my truck hidden, set the binoculars on the seat beside me, and waited. Time crawled. Each car that pulled in made my chest tighten, but when I finally saw Evelyn's white sedan parked near the entrance, the truth cut deeper than I'd imagined. Hours later, when the doors opened, she walked out. And she wasn't alone. Victor Hale was exactly the kind of man I feared she'd run to. Tall, sharp, confident, his designer jacket fitting him like a second skin, sunglasses perched casually on his face. He carried her suitcase in one hand, and with the other, he rested his palm around her waist as if it belonged there. Evelyn laughed, her eyes shining in a way I hadn't seen in years. She looked alive, carefree, glowing. She looked like the woman I once knew, but she wasn't shining for me. She was shining for him. My hands trembled as I raised the binoculars, then the camera. Click. Click. Each shot drove the knife deeper, but I didn't lower the lens. I captured it all, her smile, the way she brushed her hair behind her ear, the kiss on his cheek, her hand entwined with his. Evidence. Proof. Betrayal immortalized in images I'd never wanted to see. I stayed hidden as they drove away in his SUV, my chest hollow but my mind sharp. Rage could have driven me to burst through those doors, to scream, to demand answers. But rage would win me nothing. What I needed was control, patience, the same steady hand I'd always carried in the service and in my work. The battlefield had changed, but the rule was the same: keep your head, or you lose everything. So I waited, tracked, followed from a distance as they returned later with towels slung over their shoulders, laughing like two kids after a swim. I followed them to dinner, sat across the street with my camera aimed through the restaurant window, watching the candlelight flicker against their faces. She leaned into him, smiling with the same warmth she had once reserved only for me. I clicked the shutter again and again until I had more than enough. By midnight, they returned to the hotel, slipping inside arm in arm. I sat in the truck until the lights in their room went dark, then finally turned my key in the ignition. The drive home was long and silent, the road stretching endlessly before me. My body ached with exhaustion, but my mind burned with clarity. It was over. The marriage hadn't ended with a fight, a slammed door, or a dramatic confession. It had ended quietly, piece by piece, until the woman I loved was no longer mine. And now, I had the proof to show it. Back home, dawn crept through the blinds, painting the walls in pale gold. I sat in the living room, camera heavy in my lap, staring at the photos again and again, each one twisting the blade. But instead of breaking, something inside me hardened. I had lived my life steady, passive, always choosing peace over conflict. But this wasn't peace anymore. This was war. And I wasn't about to let Evelyn burn down everything I had built without a fight. By Monday morning, my mind was no longer clouded by shock, it was sharpened to a point. I called a colleague under the pretense of discussing work, carefully steering the conversation toward the name of a lawyer. That's how I found myself standing outside a modest brick building downtown, clutching a folder of bank statements, property records, and photographs that made my stomach turn every time I looked at them. Walking through the door felt like stepping across a line I could never return from, but I reminded myself the line had already been crossed the moment Evelyn gave herself to another man. Inside, I met Thomas Archer, a seasoned attorney with sharp eyes and no patience for wasted words. His handshake was firm, his gaze steady, and when I placed the photographs on his desk, he didn't flinch. He studied them quietly, one by one, while I sat there staring at my hands, forcing myself not to look at the images again. Finally, he leaned back, tapped the folder, and said, "This is strong. This is enough to show infidelity beyond question." My throat tightened at the sound of the word, but I nodded, forcing myself to stay composed. He advised me not to confront her, not to reveal my hand. "Act normal," he said. "If she feels safe, she'll make mistakes. Keep collecting, keep documenting. Let her think she's in control." That night, I played the part of the calm husband, greeting Evelyn with a smile, preparing her favorite pasta, pouring her wine. She looked surprised, even hesitant, as if unsure how to respond. We ate in silence, the unspoken truth between us stretching like a wire ready to snap. I studied her every move, the way she tucked her hair, the way she avoided my eyes. Halfway through dinner, she finally spoke, "Daniel, we need to talk." My fork froze midair, but I set it down slowly and met her gaze. Her voice trembled as she said, "Our marriage feels stuck. Like we're just roommates. I think it's better if we end things before it gets worse." I asked the word I already knew the answer to, divorce. She nodded, her lips pressed tight. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I simply said, "If that's what you want, I won't stop you." She blinked, caught off guard. She had expected outrage, maybe denial, anything but quiet acceptance. For a moment, guilt flickered in her eyes, but then it hardened again as she mumbled about paperwork. I agreed to keep it civil, as though we were business partners dividing assets instead of two people dismantling a life we had once built with love. That night, I slept on the couch, staring at the ceiling, my heart heavy but my resolve unshaken. She thought she was setting the rules, but she had no idea I already held the deck. The following days confirmed everything I had feared. I overheard her whispering to Victor over lunch, caught her talking about taking the house, the savings, even spousal support. She was already moving money, slipping thousands into her personal account, setting herself up to bleed me dry. But with every move she made, I had a record. Screenshots, photos, statements. Piece by piece, I was building a wall of truth that she would never climb over. When the divorce papers finally arrived, thick and heavy in a plain envelope, I wasn't surprised. Her demands were bold: the house, half the assets, even alimony. She had gone all in, certain I would crumble, certain I was still the passive man who never fought back. But as I stared at those papers, a strange calm washed over me. She was playing her game, but she had no idea mine had already begun. The day of mediation came, and for the first time, Evelyn and I sat across from each other, not as husband and wife, but as adversaries. She looked polished, composed, her lawyer at her side, while I walked in alone on Thomas Archer's advice, playing the part of the cooperative man with nothing to hide. The mediator's voice was calm, the room scented with lavender meant to ease tension, but nothing could soften the edge in the air. Evelyn spoke first, outlining her demands as if they were modest: the house, half of our savings, and short-term spousal support. She dressed her words in reason, calling it a fair start to her new chapter, but I could hear the cold calculation beneath them. I stayed composed, my voice steady as I countered. We bought the house together, but I paid the majority of the mortgage. I'm fine selling it and splitting the proceeds, or she can buy me out. Evelyn's jaw tightened, her eyes flashing, but she didn't interrupt. I went on. Savings can be split evenly. As for alimony, we're both employed, no children. I see no need for support. Her lawyer leaned in, whispering in her ear, but Evelyn snapped back herself. I supported him while he built his career. I worked part-time, kept the house running. My time matters too. I met her gaze evenly. You've been full-time for 5 years now, making good money. We're the same age. You don't need support, you just want more than what's fair. The mediator tried to suggest compromises, but Evelyn's mask was slipping. Her voice rose, sharp with accusation. You're trying to force me out, Daniel. You want the house, the money, and to leave me with nothing. I didn't flinch. I want what's fair. You're the one trying to rewrite the truth. Her eyes burned, and for the first time in years, I saw her not as the woman I married, but as someone hardened by greed, resentment, and regret. The session ended with no agreement, her lawyer pulling her aside, telling her to save her energy for court. As she walked past me, she hissed under her breath, I didn't expect this from you. You used to be easy to control. I let the words hang, saying nothing, because silence was its own weapon. When trial day arrived, I stood in front of the mirror in my old gray suit, one that fit looser now after months of sleepless nights and lost appetite. The man looking back at me was not the same one who had once swallowed his doubts to keep peace. My eyes were sharper, harder, my face leaner, my posture straighter. Beside me, Barney pressed his head against my leg, as if sensing what lay ahead. I whispered, "Wish me luck, buddy," before walking out the door. In the courtroom, Evelyn sat with her lawyer, her hair perfect, her green suit crisp, but her face pale beneath the makeup. Behind her, Victor Hale lingered quietly, his smug expression like a shadow waiting to claim what wasn't his. My attorney, Archer, gave me a small nod, calm and prepared, while I kept my focus on the judge's gavel as it struck wood and the session began. Evelyn's lawyer painted a picture of a marriage that had simply run its course, blaming emotional distance and suggesting Evelyn had carried more of the weight than I had. I sat still, letting the words pass over me, because I knew what was coming next. Then Archer stood. His voice was clear, his words sharp. This isn't just a story of two people drifting apart. This is a story of betrayal. This marriage ended because of Mrs. Cole's affair. Silence hit the room like a wave. Evelyn's head snapped up, her eyes wide with panic. Victor shifted uneasily in his seat. Her lawyer froze mid-breath as Archer handed the folder to the judge. Photographs. Dates. Records. Proof. Evelyn's hand trembled as she flipped through them, her face draining of color. The lies she had wrapped herself in were burning away, one photograph at a time. And for the first time in months, I felt the weight I had carried alone begin to lift. The courtroom shifted after that, the air thick with Evelyn's unraveling composure. Her lawyer stammered, trying to reframe the affair as something that had begun only after our marriage had collapsed, but Archer cut in swiftly, his voice cool and deliberate. "Your Honor, the divorce petition was filed a month ago. These photographs are dated 6 months prior. This relationship began well before any legal separation." The judge's stern gaze fixed on Evelyn, and she lowered her head, unable to meet his eyes. Victor, once smug, now looked small and uneasy in the back of the room, his presence shrinking with every word that left Archer's mouth. Then came the financial evidence, the bank transfer of $18,000, shifted into her personal account under the guise of renovations. Archer laid it out calmly, page after page, while Evelyn stumbled through weak explanations, each one more transparent than the last. The judge's expression hardened, and I knew in that moment that her carefully built strategy had collapsed in full view of the court. When asked if I wanted restitution, damages, or alimony of my own, I stood slowly and said, "No, Your Honor. I just want what's fair, and I want to move on with my life." My voice trembled slightly, but the truth in it was unmistakable. I didn't want revenge, I wanted closure. The ruling came like the toll of a final bell. The marriage was dissolved. The house would remain mine if I covered Evelyn's 30% share. The assets would not be split evenly, 70% to me, 30% to her, with the $18,000 she had already taken counted against her portion. Spousal support was denied outright, the court citing both her income and her misconduct. Each word stripped away the power she had tried to wield, and when the gavel struck for the last time, the sound was like a door closing behind us forever. I watched her sink into her chair, pale, trembling, staring at nothing as her lawyer whispered uselessly in her ear. Victor had already slipped out of the courtroom, vanishing the moment her losses became real. That was the kind of man he was, eager when it was easy, gone when it turned hard. I gathered my papers, shook Archer's hand, and lingered for just a moment, watching Evelyn through the weight of everything we had once been. She finally lifted her eyes to mine, her face streaked with tears, her defenses shattered. "You set this up," she whispered bitterly. "You followed me, watched me, waited." I answered quietly, "I protected myself. You just didn't expect me to." There was no anger in my voice, only a tired truth. She wept then, openly, without pretense. Not guilt, not manipulation, just grief. And I realized we weren't enemies locked in a battle anymore. We were simply two people mourning something that had died long before today. I reached out, laid a hand gently on her shoulder, and said, "We'll get through this. Not together, but we'll get through it. Just don't build your next life on lies. Be honest, with yourself and with them." She nodded faintly, eyes full of sorrow and perhaps gratitude, before I turned and walked away. In the weeks that followed, the house became mine alone. Evelyn moved out swiftly, taking only the essentials, leaving behind furniture, memories, and the silence that now echoed through each room. At first, the solitude felt heavy, like a punishment. But slowly, it became something else, a blank page. I rebuilt in small ways, repainting the living room, fixing the porch, rearranging the furniture. Barney stayed by my side, his steady companionship grounding me through nights when the past came rushing back like a tide. And little by little, the grief faded into something quieter, an emptiness not of despair, but of possibility. Months later, possibility became something real. At the library, Barney tugged me toward a woman with warm eyes and reddish hair, her arms full of books. Her name was Lily. She didn't pry, didn't press, just listened when I was ready and laughed at my bad jokes when I wasn't. Coffee turned into walks, walks into dinners, and dinners into something that felt like home again. She reminded me that love wasn't about possession or control, it was about presence, honesty, and choosing each other every day. 18 months after my divorce, I stood once more on the shore of the same lake where I had once proposed to Evelyn. But this time, my heart wasn't heavy with loss, it was full of hope. I knelt before Lily with a simple ring, Barney wagging his tail at our side, and asked her to marry me. Her yes was soft but certain, her smile brighter than any I had seen in years. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't just feel alive, I felt whole.
Thank you for watching. If this story touched you, shocked you, or simply made you think, don't keep it to yourself. Leave a comment, your thoughts, your story, your truth. Subscribe for more raw, real, and unforgettable confessions. And if this story made you feel seen, share it. Someone else might need to hear it too. You're not alone here. This channel is a safe space for those who've been betrayed, broken, and rebuilt.